Some comments? I really do. Like some comments? Don't care about you. Like some comments?
Yes, so to kick us off this time then, No Grave Can Hold Me is another of them ace little scary short efforts. This and plucked from the pages of the second issue of Ghosts, which were put out by DC in early 70s. And honestly, of all the similar such spooky tales you might be aware of that are set in or around the Carpathian village of Vorkuta, this has got to be right up there. For real. As is so often the case, this little doozy illustrates the ever-contemporary themes of ignorance and subsequent prejudice via a ruthless fruit farmer's loathsome lies, whipping up a mindless mob into a fervent frenzy regarding the activities of a local woman who gets deemed to be a witch by those without two brain cells to knock together. Yon old dear is understandably none too chuffed at being burned at stake and whatnot for nothing but cheap plums and that. So she comes back with time-served malefic magnificence and sets about making naughtiest Van's life a complete misery, no matter that many innocent cattle are slaughtered along the way, no matter that all money is moulded, whatever that's supposed to mean. And things don't get any better either for old Van, you can be sure of that. Some might reckon that perhaps she starts going a bit overboard, yon old wrong crone, and maybe she does. But she's had short end at stick here, hasn't she? And she's a right to feel upset, and upset she certainly remains. Title called Neverboy next then, and looking at the sort of kit I usually pick up, are a bit torn with this if I'm honest, and on a cursory flick through, still weren't mega convinced, but this is an old Pez purchase at that much missed bargain butt gaff, just round corner from King's Cross that we lost many moons back, and at time I'd already picked up all the discount Vertigo gear they were infamous for, so I reckoned I'd edge me bets here and give this a crack for a couple of quid. Oddly enough, considering the monochromatic stylings of the cover illustration, it's a tad trippy is this one. I mean, you'd never have guessed that, would you? So inside it kicks off with what appears to be a relatively normal domestic relationship with a young lad, mum and dad, and whatnot. But something's not right. Clearly things are not on the qui vive, and surprise, surprise, all is not what it seems. What with rainbow rivers flowing through theatres in middle at school talent shows, and that, your everyday reality bends and branches off from there, and we're soon left wondering who is how, where is what, and what is where. Coming off like this likeable lad is not only maybe a figment of someone else's imagination, but quite possibly his own. And this ambiguous illustration of reality turns in on itself even further as we begin to speculate whether yon fella even exists at all. Certainly on the more familiar planes us mere mortals tend to inhabit, though fortunately for him at least, paths have been crossed with a taxi driver who clearly possesses a relatively open noggin and a keen eye for the unusual. Turns out to be an artist too, does yon fella. Of some repute and all in certain circles, but he's misplaced his mojo like and fell on soft times. So what on earth can a dimension swapping psychedelic rainbow rider possibly give to offer a washed out painter looking to get his brushes back out? I don't bloody know, do I? All told, not a bad yarn is this, though whether it manages to cover its bets regarding the realisation of its genuinely interesting ideas is down to how much you can pay attention to, or how much you're willing to ignore, as the case may be. It has a good crack at it though, and that's got to be worth some, hasn't it? Quick gander at least. The nobody to finish us off this time then. And I know, man, I do know Jeff Lemire again, but clearly I can't help myself, can I? And like lion's share of his kit, if it needs reading, doesn't it? I was struggling a little bit for a third N, if truth be known, apart from a couple of bits I didn't really fancy. So, really, when you think about it, why should I put myself through all that kind of unnecessary ag just to placate your ungrateful shower? What have you ever done for me, eh? Eh? There you go then. Shut it. Reasonably visible, invisible man vibes here from the off, ain't it really? And yet, H.G. Wells does not go without a few tips of the invisible hat. But for me, there's also more than a few similarities with bits of this and some of the themes picked over in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man novel and all. So check that if you've not. Really, check them both. If you've never bothered for some reason, you pin lazy cats. Same title, different types of greatness. Going back a few years, a couple of decades or maybe two, perhaps. Apropos of absolutely little other than overfamiliar cordiality. Out of nowhere, this fella asked me which my personal favourite were out of them two top drawer classics, Invisible Man or Invisible Man. I thought about my answer briefly before realising I didn't have to give one. Why don't you mind your own kin business? I said simply. A stock response that has seen me able to succinctly cut short all manner of nosy gets down years. Feel free to use it. So this sets its stall out with a lovely one-page setup. Fairly classic, Lorna wanders into small town mode as narrated by onlooking resident vibes. And like most of Lemire's work, the devil is in the detail. Or lack of. He shows us what he needs and you can make your own mind up about everything else. Needless to say, some dude rocking up bandaged head to foot in middle of nowhere gets the provincial tongues wagging with ignorant, presumptuous chittle-chattle as to the who's, whys and wherefores and that, reckoning to be all concerned for the community and whatnot, but deep down most seem kind of chuffed. How there's something fresh to gossip over for a change. And from there it rolls out in various ways, as your man cracks on with his reparative science business and turns more to other sorts of bottles for his solace, as his intended cure continues to elude him. Most of the locals feel fine in just leaving him to it, but as is often the case, others aren't happy enough in their own little lot to leave others alone and absolutely just have to stick the beaks in and mix custard in with gravy. And it's not really like our hero is entirely the innocent sort. I mean, few of us are really, innit? If you're going to try and get all high and mighty about it. but he's rarely guilty of the kind of things young ghoulish gossip mongers want to try and pin on him. Like all Jeff Lemire's kit, this is well worth a look. And no, obviously really, there's similarities with some of his other kit. Certainly stylistically speaking. It ploughs its own furrow all the same, does this. Give it a do, man.
Let me some comments.